Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist, and today I'm going to be doing a Fluffal Frightfur deck profile. So you guys have been requesting this one on literally every single video, and don't worry, I love it when you guys do that. I love it when you guys are like so passionate about a deck, and I'm like, man, I really need to do that, because it gets me pumped for a deck like this, and I love Fluffal Frightfurs. I think the concept of this deck is super cool, where you're actually playing around with cute and cuddly stuffed animals, and then when you fusion summon them, they become stuffed animals filled with blades, to be able to really be menacing and mean. It really reminds me of Five Nights at Freddy's, the deck, and it is insane how much this deck can actually OTK your opponent. So, without further ado, guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell on there so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below, because we have some awesome rewards, you guys, like getting your name in the description for every single video, getting a signed card sent in the mail, or even getting a requested deck profile just like this one every single month that you are a patron, along with test hands. So, without further ado, let's get straight on into this. So, first off, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Fluffal Dog. This is basically the searcher of the deck. What this card does is when it's normal or special summon from your hand, you can add an Edgem Saber or a Fluffal monster from your deck to your hand, which is pretty good, except for another copy of Fluffal Dog, which is really good to search out literally any of your Fluffals that you need. I wish it just had an Edgem monster, not Edgem Sabers, because it would make the deck so much more consistent. Then we're going to be playing 3 copies of Fluffal Penguin. Fluffal Penguin is cute, cuddly, and awesome. During your main phase, you can special summon another Fluffal monster for your hand except a penguin, and you can only use this effect once per turn. While this card is faceable on the field, if this card is sent to the graveyard as a fusion material to fusion summon a Frightfur fusion monster, you can draw 2 and then discard 1, which is really, really good. I mean, you get to draw 2 and then discard something like Wing to get you another draw 2 on top of that. That's pretty good. We then play 2 copies of Fluffal Dolphin, which is a new monster that we have in the deck. This card is kind of weird and kind of cool all at once, because what it does is it lets you target a toy vendor in your graveyard and set it, and if you do, you get to send a Fluffal monster or an Edgem Sabers from your deck to the graveyard. And if this card is sent to the graveyard as fusion material for the fusion summon, you can shuffle into your deck one of your fusion spells or polymerizations that is banished or in your graveyard. Pretty good to be able to recover those polymerizations, put them back in the deck, so your copy of your Frightfur Patchwork is live again, and also letting you target a toy vendor and set it back on your side of the field as well, too, to be able to recover those cards. It has a lot of resource management built into Dolphin. We then play 3 copies of Fluffal Bear, just to search out our copies of our toy vendor, which is going to be super helpful to be able to get it out of the deck. You can also tribute this card on your side of the field to target a polymerization in your graveyard and add it back to your hand. We play just 2 copies of Fluffal Wing. Yes, I finally did it. I cut Fluffal Wing down to 2. I feel like Fluffal Wing is good at 2. I like it at 3. But to make room for Dolphin and the other cards that just came out in this deck, I feel like I needed to cut this down to 2. What this card does is if it's in your graveyard and you control a toy vendor, you can banish this card and then target a Fluffal in your graveyard and banish it as well, and then draw a card, and then if you can send the toy vendor you control to the graveyard, and if you get to draw another card. So you get to draw 2. Basically, in a nutshell, the text is kind of weird. It should read, if this card's in your graveyard, banish it and a Fluffal monster from your graveyard, draw a card. Then you can banish or send to your graveyard toy vendor, and if toy vendor is sent to the graveyard, then you get to draw an additional card. That's the way it should read, but it's kind of weird how it's worded. But you do actually get 2 draws and a search off this card, which is really insane. We then play for the one-ofs. We're playing a single copy of Fluffal Owl. Owl, when it's normal summoned or special summoned from your hand, you get to add a Fluffal, you get to add a polymerization for your deck to your hand, and you can pay 500 life points to fusion summon a Frightfur monster from your extra deck, using monsters from your hand or field as fusion materials, which is really good. 1 copy of Fluffal Cat, because this card, when it's used as fusion material, can recover your fusion spell that you use, like your polymerization from your graveyard back to your hand. 1 copy of Sheep is the last Fluffal monster that you play in the deck, and this card is really good in the deck too, because what it does is if you control a Fluffal monster, you can bounce the Fluffal back to your hand and then special summon Sheep to your side of the field, which is really good, and then it lets you special summon an Edgem monster from your hand or graveyard, which is pretty good. That's why I still play Sheep at 1. We then play for the new cards. We're playing 3 copies of Edgem Scythe. Edgem Scythe is the literal craziest card in this deck now. This lets you fusion summon during your opponent's turn. Do I need to say more? if you guys know anything about the extra deck, this card is really, really insane. Because letting you summon Cruel Whale or your copy of El Tigre or your copy of your Sabers from the extra deck is so good to be able to just get them onto your side of the field on your opponent's turn, to be able to pop stuff, to be able to deal with, you know, not getting OTK'd. It's just such a good card. But what this card does, word for word, is during your opponent's main phase, you can reveal this card in your hand. It's a quick effect, and then you get to fusion summon a Frightfur fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand or field as fusion materials, including this card. And if a Frightfur fusion monster you control would be destroyed by a battle or by card effect, you can banish this card from your graveyard instead. It also protects them. Like, this card is so good. We then play 3 copies of Edgem Chain. Edgem Chain is still a good 3 of in this deck, because when this card declares an attack, you can add an Edgem Chain from your deck to your hand. And if this card is sent from your hand or field to the graveyard, you get to add a Frightfur card from your deck to your hand, which is usually going to be a Frightfur fusion. We then play a single copy of Edgem Sabers. You really only need 1 Sabers, because once it goes to graveyard, you're just going to get to keep resolving it every single turn, because if this card is in your graveyard, you can place a card from your hand on top of your deck, and then if you do special summon this card in event position, but you can only use this effect once per turn. Really good card. So that's it for the monsters, guys. Let's get into spells. You don't need hand traps in this deck. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. You don't need them. This deck is an OTK based deck, and you have so many disruptions with just Scythe now. So for the 1-ofs, we're going to be playing a single copy of the Frightfur Repair. Frightfur Repair lets you target a Frightfur fusion monster in your graveyard and return it to the extra deck, which is pretty good. And then you can special summon a Fluffal or an Edgem monster from your graveyard, which is really good. But the super good effect about this card is you can banish it from your graveyard to special summon a Fluffal or Frightfur monster from your hand, because you're going to usually send this card to the graveyard off your copy of Cruel Whale, which is going to be super nice to be able to do. We then play 1 copy of Frightfur Fusion, just to be able to, like, Miracle Fusion away cards from the graveyard to go into your copies of your Frightfur Fusion monsters, which is pretty good. We then play 3 copies of Polymerization. Polymerization is really good too in this deck. It's just basically a fusion spell. That's all it does, is it lets you fusion summon using monsters from your hand or field. If you don't know what Polymerization does, you've been living under a rock. Then we play 3 copies of Frightfur Patchwork. Patchwork is really probably the best searcher in the entire game of Yu-Gi-Oh! And this card is splashable in so many different decks. Because what this card does is it lets you add an Edgem and a Polymerization from your deck to your hand. Like, I can add Edgem Scythe, I can add Edgem Sabers, I can add Edgem Chain, I can add any of my Edgem monsters plus a Poly to my hand, and then go off. This card is really, really good in the deck. We then play 3 copies of Foolish Burial Goods. Foolish Burial Goods is in here just to send our copies of Toy Vendor to the graveyard, because when Toy Vendor hits the graveyard, you get to search the deck for a Frightfur or an Edgem or a copy of your Fluffal monster. It's just Sabers that you can search off of, because it was one of the first cards that was ever released. So Toy Vendor is really good, because once per turn you can discard a card to draw a card and then show it, and then if it was a Fluffal monster, you could special summon one of those monsters in your hand. Otherwise, you discard the card you drew. Pretty good to be able to just special summon a monster from your hand. We then play 3 copies of Call by the Grave just to stop our opponent's hand traps, because you want to search the deck, you don't want to get hit, you want to draw on the deck, you don't want to get hit by Ash. So you go ahead and play the copy of your Call by the Grave to just stop your opponent from doing everything that they're trying to do against you. So that's it for the main deck, guys. Let's get into the extra deck. So, for the extra deck, we're going to be playing 3 copies, which may or may not be overkill. 3 copies of Cruel Whale. I like the 3 Cruel Whale. I think I could get away with 2, but if this card is fusion summoned, you can destroy a card on both players' fields. And then once per turn, quick effect, you can target a fusion monster you control and send a Frightfur card from your deck or extra deck to the graveyard, and then if you do, the targeted monster gains attack equal to the half the original attack of the monster. So you can send from your deck to the graveyard another Cruel Whale, or except Cruel Whale. So you can send to your graveyard like a copy of Sabertooth and make it go up by 1200 all the way up to 38, which is pretty good. Now, keep in mind, you might be thinking, you know, popping a card on my field and popping a card on my opponent's field, that's not that great. But you're forgetting something. We have an effect in the deck that protects it. Scythe. Scythe protects your Cruel Whale. So if you go second in this deck, you can essentially interrupt your opponent turn 1 and put upwards of a 3800 beat stick on the field. That's really good. And this is generic. This takes an Edgem and a Fluffal. That's it. So what you do is during your opponent's turn, going first, you ditch the Scythe, special summon out Cruel Whale going first, and then once you special summon out the Cruel Whale, you target the Cruel Whale to destroy itself, and then you banish the Scythe from the graveyard, and it doesn't destroy Cruel Whale, it destroys your opponent's card and not yours. That's really insane. So it's really good to use your copy of Scythe to fusion summon into your Cruel Whale. So then we're going to be playing 2 copies of Frightfur Sabertooth. This card's still insanely good. When it's fusion summon, you get to target a Frightfur monster in your graveyard and special summon it. And all Frightfur monsters you control gain 400 attack. And if this card is fusion summoned using 3 or more monsters, it cannot be destroyed by battle or by card effects. Pretty good. Usually going to be the last card that you're going to put on the field to OTK your opponent. 2 copies of Frightfur Tiger, or El Tigre is what I call it always. It's just an inside joke for like me and my crew. But what this card does is when this card is fusion summoned, you get to target cards on the field up to the number of fusion materials used to fusion summon this card and then destroy them. So if I put 4 materials into this, I get to destroy 4 cards on the field. If I just standard fusion summon this card with a copy of Sabers and a Fluffal monster, I get to destroy 2 cards on the field right off the bat. And then also it has the ability that all Frightfur monsters you control gain 300 attack for each Fluffal and Frightfur monster you control. So right off the bat, if I control Cruel Whale, a copy of Sabertooth, and this, they're gaining 4 from this, and then they're gaining 9 from this. So they're all going up by 900, 1300, and then whatever he boosts himself up to, which could be all the way upwards of 15, or all the way upwards of like, I don't even know, like all the way up to 1200 on him. So you're gaining 2500 just off of these 3 being on the field to the Cruel Whale to make the Cruel Whale go up to 5100. That's really big. We then play 2 copies of Kraken. Kraken is crack-a-lackin', and I really like playing 2 copies of Kraken in this deck. It's really a good card, because what it does is once per turn you can target 1 monster your opponent controls and send to the graveyard, and then this card can attack directly the turn the effect is activated. And then this card can make a second attack during each turn, or each battle phase, and then once per turn at the end of the battle phase, if this card battled, you change it to defense position. I like it at 2. I feel like it's still a good card at 2, so I play it at 2. Abyss Dweller, because you play a lot of water monsters in the deck, and it can shut down your opponent, so it's a really good card. And plus, it makes your water monsters go up by 500 if it has a material that's a water monster. Number 60, because it can double the attack of a monster, really good, and then it also lets you draw 2 and discard 1. Bahamut Shark, because it's easy to summon totally awesome. Literally, if you open up Dolphin and Penguin, you can summon Toad. Because you normal summon them both out, summon out Bahamut, detach a material, summon Toad, and then you pass. I mean, I think I did that in the test hand video, which I think I'm going to be doing test hand to this deck. We're going to be doing a single copy of Appaloosa. Appaloosa is really good in the deck too, because you can summon a bunch of monsters to your side of the field. Even if you just get 3 materials on her, she's getting you those monster negates, which is pretty good. And the deck already OTKs enough. You don't need Boral Sword in this deck. It's win more at that point. Appaloosa is the way to go. And then we play a single copy of Cross Sheep. Cross Sheep, it's a fusion deck. Why wouldn't you play Cross Sheep? It gets you Appaloosa for fusion summoning. I mean, literally you go into Cross Sheep, use a poly, go into Cruel Whale, and then summon out a copy of a monster that you used as a material back to your side of the field, and then you can link all 3 of them away and go for Appaloosa with 3 materials. I mean, it's that easy to go into Appaloosa in this deck. So that's it for the deck, guys. I hope you did enjoy it. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and definitely hit that bell in there so you can become part of the notification squad. This deck is really fun now. It's really, really crazy to actually play around with this deck. It's super, super, super fun, and it's probably the best OTK-based deck in the entire game right now. Like, really insane. Like, even being able to fusion someone on your opponent's turn, like, that's really good. So, anyways, guys, this is DarkArmedDuelist. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.